Hey guys, I'm Victoria Froelich. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be my life story. I'm so excited to share my life story. I love sharing it because there are so many miracles. There's so many good things that come from bad things. And I love being able to share that with people because I think so many of us feel so alone when we're in these hard situations and when we're living a really hard life. We don't see the good at the end. But I look back at my life and I think that I was meant to experience a lot of hardship and a lot of hard things so that in the end I could share with everyone that in the end there is good and that bad things can be made good. And yeah, I'm so excited to be sharing my life story. So let's get to it. Starting off, I was born in a city called Vladivostok, Russia. It's the very far east. I'll put a picture here, but there's a lot of Asian influence because it's very close to Asia. So I was born there in 1995, which was a little bit after the Soviet Union collapsed and all of that. So during this time, it was a very poor and just a very hard time for this country of Russia. A little background on my birth parents. My birth mother was 16 years old when she became pregnant with me. And when she told my birth dad, he was double her age. He was in his 30s. He just left her and wanted nothing to do with her. At the time, he was already married. He had 2 little boys at home, and it just obviously wasn't a good situation. So I ended up going straight into an orphanage because my family, my birth mom, could not afford me. She was too young, and her father had actually passed away when she was like 8. So she was with her birth mom and I think a sister. And so she was left knowing that she couldn't afford for another child to enter into the world. So I was put into the orphanage shortly after, and I was there for 2.5 years. When I was 2.5, I was then adopted, and I came home to Utah with another boy who was in the orphanage. We're not blood related, but we're the same age, so I kind of got to grow up with a twin, which was fun. And we both came to Utah together, and we were put into a family, and we had another sister there who was biologically my adoptive parents. So there were 3 of us, 3 siblings. None of us were blood related, and all of us were firstborn children. So you can imagine how that was in the house. It was fun. So yeah, I was raised in Utah my whole life. I was in a really small town, like a little farm town up in northern Utah, and I was there until I was 18. I try to be really positive with my experience because I know I was extremely lucky to come to Utah and come to America and be given the life that I was given. But I also know that just because you are adopted does not mean that you get the life that you deserve. And I didn't get the life that I deserved. When I was little, I went through a lot of extremely hard abuse. It started when I was very little, and it kept going until I was about 12-ish, and then it mainly became verbal abuse. My younger years was all physical and psychological, and when I got older, it was mainly verbal and psychological abuse. A lot of the abuse to me was punishment, so I didn't understand at such an early age that it was abuse. I felt like I was just a bad kid because they were punishments. Most of my childhood was spent doing absolutely nothing because I was always grounded. I was always a troubled child. I would be forced to stand in closets for hours, sometimes days. And this closet was in our garage. It had no windows, and I would stand there. And I would get so tired, and I'd want to like get on my knees as a little kid and just like sleep because I was like 6 years old. And my adopted mother would come in and say, "You're sitting, you need to be standing, stand back up, you have to start all over." And I would be there locked in a dark closet for so long. Sometimes I was lucky and it would be locked in a shower stall. Sometimes it was that I had to sit in the bathtub. Sometimes it was that I had to sit in the corner in a stool. But a lot of my childhood was spent doing nothing, which caused a lot of boredom, obviously. And there was also a lot of physical abuse. I remember being in 1st grade and my mom came home and was like, "I heard you pull down your pants in class." I'm thinking, I would never do that. Are you kidding me? I'm terrified of you. Why would I do more things so that you're angry at me? I would never do that. And my mom locked me in a closet for hours until she come back and said, "Did you do it?" And I said, "No, I would never do that. Why would I do that?" And she kept locking me in the closet. I was there for days, and I had to stand there overnight and just stand in a dark closet with no windows. It was pitch black. And until I fessed up to what my mom wanted me to, then I could leave. And so finally I remember coming to her and being like, okay, I did it. I pulled down my pants in class, like, can I be done? And she said, see, I told you. And I'm thinking in my head, I never did it. I'm just telling you that I did it so that I can get out of the closet, because I'm so bored and I'm so tired of standing for days. And then, of course, as abusive parents go, I got another punishment on top of that because I did it, even though I didn't. And it was really hard. I look back and I'm so proud of myself, because no child should ever have to go through any of the things that I went through. And I still did so well in school, and I still did so well as a person in whole after going through so much heartache. I remember being in like 3rd grade, and I remember having to walk up these stairs to school, and my butt hurt so bad, and my back, because I had been whipped with a belt so many times the night before. And I remember thinking, wow, this like really sucks. Like, are any other kids getting this type of punishment? Like, are any other kids as bad as me? And it just broke me as a little kid, because I wanted nothing than to be loved. But I would sit down in class and I would just feel the burn of the belt whips on my back and on my butt, and it would hurt so bad. And this was my reality. I was terrified to go home. School began to be a really big safe haven for me, and church began to be a really big safe haven for me, because if I could be anywhere else but home, that was home for me. And it's really hard, because I look back and think, wow, no matter the situation that I would have been born into, it would have been so hard. I would have either stayed in Russia and been extremely poor, and who knows what I would have gotten into, drugs and all sorts of things, or I would have came to America and I would have been put into an extremely abusive household. So no matter the life that I was given, it was going to be hard. And I believe that this was for a reason. I believe that there are no coincidences, and I believe that I knew before that this would be the life that I chose, that no matter what path I took in my childhood, it would be hard and it would be unfair, but it was something that I knew that I could do. So church, school, those are all my safe havens. If I was not at home, I was safe. And I learned to have a really good relationship with just church and leaders in general, because that was safer than being at home. And for those of you who don't know, I was raised as an active Mormon. My parents were both Mormon. My mom was a convert at 18, and my dad was a member his whole life. And I grew up being raised in the LDS Mormon religion. We would read our scriptures every day. We would go to church every Sunday. We looked like a perfect LDS Mormon family, but we weren't. And I wish that somebody would have saw, but they didn't. So I grew to love church. I grew to love Young Women's and all the church organizations that the LDS church had. I started going to seminary when I was in 9th grade. I was a freshman, and I had lots of questions, because there were a lot of things that were not clicking for me from being taught at home and then seeing a different thing, and then being taught in seminary different things. And so I did struggle a little bit with the teachings of Joseph Smith and all of this, because it seemed a little bit back and forth, and it just was confusing to me. But then again, I loved it because I was safe. And that's what I kept holding on to. I was safe. I couldn't count on my parents to talk about anything, but at the end of the day, I learned to pray, and I learned that I could talk to God about what I wanted. And at the end of the day, God wasn't going to come back at me, and he wasn't going to hurt me. And so I had a really strong relationship with God as a kid, because he was like my dad. He was like someone that I could talk to and I could trust, because I didn't get that at home. So when I was 15, that's when everything really shifted for me, and I felt like God really helped me understand who he was and the purpose that he wanted my life to go. So when I was 15, I had a lot of really hard things happen to me. I ended up starting the year with my grandma passing away, which was really hard. I loved her, and I was with her all the time. I was with her all summer, cleaning her home and spending time with her. And later into freshman year, I guess I was sophomore at this point now, going over to my best friend's house. I loved this kid so much. He made me feel safe. He made me feel loved. And he was everything for me at the moment. As you know, 15 years old, that love feels like it's the best thing ever, right? And it was so pure and clean. And I ended up going to his house, watched the BYU game, and they lost, unfortunately. So everyone was already kind of in a bad mood, but we ended up driving home and we ended up getting in a really bad car accident. He was ejected out of the car and me and his sister in the car. And I just remember like taking my left hand and trying to take my seatbelt off, and I fell out of the car. I get out and I see him on the ground, and I just think, it's okay, like we're just gonna have something to talk about at school next week, like it's gonna be okay, it's gonna be okay. And the next thing I knew, I hear cop cars and ambulances, and someone comes up to me from my ward and they're like, are you okay? I just called the cops, like da-da-da. I hear his sister yelling, like, is he okay, is he okay? I get put on a gurney, I see his mom in the corner screaming, and there's just so much happening around me. I was in pure shock, and I remember just thinking, I want to go home for the first time because I don't want to be in this situation. It was terrifying. And I ended up getting to the hospital and getting checked out, and his grandpa ended up coming to me and telling me that my friend passed away. And this was the hardest news I had heard in my entire life. It broke me. It broke me so much. I thought I was gonna die, and I thought that life was over. I remember going home, and my parents, of course, were just really mean about it and really just hard on me and telling me how it was my fault and how if I didn't do this, it wouldn't have happened. And I carried so much guilt for so long about it, and it was so hard, guys. It completely flipped my life around. But I went the next day. My mom forced me actually to go like give my condolences, and I went over there and I walked up to his sister who was in the car accident with me, and she gave me a hug and she whispered, it's okay because we have temples. And it just took me back. I just walked a little bit back and I was like, yeah, you're right. And I left the house and I went home and I went in my room, shut the door, and I just kept thinking, it's okay because we have temples. And that phrase has stuck with me 15 years later. And I just think, wow, out of everything you could have said to me in that moment, like, oh, like we got this, like stay strong, da da da, she chose to say it's okay because we have temples. And I thought so long and hard about that. And I got down on my knees and I prayed for the first time in a while because I was just so distraught. And I felt really strongly that I needed to serve a mission and that I needed to use this experience for good, and that she was right, and that we have temples. I'd see him again, and that life was going to be okay. So I sat down on my knees that night and I prayed, and I promised Heavenly Father, I promised him I was going to serve a mission, which if you don't know, a mission is like where you leave your home and your family and you go and preach the gospel for 18 months to 2 years. And I promised him right then and there I was going to do it. And later I had some more horrible things happen as a freshman. But senior year rolled around, I survived high school, and I was getting my mission call. It was like February 13th, I believe. And I remember getting a call from my dad. I was at school and he's like, the post office has your mission call. It came in. Word on the street is the packet is heavy, which if you don't know, back in the day, we got little packets, and it was like a rumor that the heavier the packet, it meant you were going international. Anyway, I was so excited. I wanted to go to Russia because I wanted to go back and I wanted to visit my family, and I felt so connected to my birth mom. I would pray for her almost every night from the time that I felt like I needed to serve a mission because I felt like I was going to go to Russia. I felt it in my bones. I just knew it. And hearing that I had a heavy packet was a sign that maybe it could be true. So it was 7 o'clock and I finally got to open my call. I'll put a little video of it. But I ended up getting called to Vladivostok, Russia, which is exactly where I was born. And I felt like God really knew who I was. I finally felt like God saw me, he was aware of me, he loved me, and that everything was gonna be okay. I was gonna meet my family. I was going to finally find my home. So June comes along, I enter the MTC, I think June 14th, and it's the best day of my life. Not only do I get a break from my family for 18 months, but I get to go preach the gospel and I get to go just do everything that I love. And I'm so excited. I get to MTC, and the first day I sit down and we have like these investigators. And I remember sitting there and this guy comes in, he's like, I'm Edward, like, привет. And I had this instant thought of like, you're gonna marry him. And I was like, what a weird thought. A week before I entered the MTC, I wrote off my missionary because I had a missionary and I wrote him off. So it's just, God's timing is very crazy. But I just kind of was like, that's very weird because if he lives in Russia, like, it was just weird. Anyway, I keep just serving a mission. A few days later, that same Edward comes in class and it's my teacher. And I didn't know that the investigators are your teachers. But then I thought, wow, that's even weirder. But that thought kind of like went away as time went on in the MTC and stuff, and it was fine, but it was very interesting to me. At the time, my MTC teacher had a girlfriend and everything, so it just was very confusing to me why I received that thought. Anyway, I'm still loving the MTC. It's literally the best place ever. It was so fun. I loved everything about it. And one day, I think it was like 4 weeks in, I got a letter from someone and they're like, oh, you're in trouble. And I was like, I hope not. But I remembered that it was like July 4th time and my family had sent those little poppets that you pop and they kind of snap. And I throwing them out the window at people to scare them. I know, really not good on my part. But I did that and I thought maybe I was in trouble for that. So I get to the district president's office and he's like in those twirly chairs, right? And he turns around and he's like, well, Sister Johnson, I'm sorry to inform you that we can't get you a visa to Russia. And immediately tears just flowed down and I couldn't believe it. I was in shock. I was so sad. I remember just feeling like this can't be true. This has to be a joke. Like I was like, there's no way. I was put into so much shock again. And I was heartbroken. And so I remember going back that time, like I remember going back after I heard that and thinking, God hates me. Like God legit hates me. He thought it would be funny to give me such a beautiful gift that I thought was because he saw me, because he loved me, he was aware of me, and I was wrong, and he actually doesn't, and he actually thinks this is all a joke to him. And I was so angry with God, guys. I was so angry with God. I remember thinking, how could you do this to me, God? You literally gave me this opportunity that was so coincidental. And I've learned that there's no coincidences, only miracles, and you take it away from me. You were gonna make me serve in the exact same city, only to take that away. Like, you knew how much that meant to me. You knew that I prayed for this for years. You know that I wanted nothing than to feel loved by my family, and that was the opportunity. Was I was going to go to Russia and I was going to find my family and I was going to finally feel like I belonged and I was loved, and God ripped that from me and I was angry. I just remember telling God how I felt and I was distraught. But I couldn't leave the MTC. I couldn't leave my mission because that meant I had to go home, and home wasn't safe and home was not a good place. So I had no choice but to stay on my mission, and I had a really hard time. A few weeks later, after kind of getting through things, I got a new call and I ended up getting called to the Baltic mission. And it was great. For those of you who don't know, the Baltics is right by Russia. It's Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia. And I ended up getting to serve my mission there, and it was the best thing ever. I loved my mission so much. I'm really grateful I got to serve there. But there wasn't a part of me during that time that still kind of, was sad about everything. Anyway, so I get out there. I get to serve in New York for a little bit actually, which was really fun. I had never been to New York before. So I got to go to New York for a few weeks. I had about a transfer left on my mission and I was getting ready to go home. And I remember going to church one day and I see this guy in a cowboy hat and I was like, what's he doing? Like, why is he wearing a cowboy hat? He's definitely from the US. So I went right up to him and I was like, hey, where are you from? And he was like, oh, I'm actually the mission president of the Vladivostok, Russia mission. And I was like, wow, how crazy. I was like, I was actually supposed to serve there. We get talking a little bit and I end up telling him my story. I say, hey, yeah, I do have family there. I want to meet them. I'd love to. And he offers to help me find them. And I was just taken back a little bit. I was like, wow, okay, yeah. So I ended up emailing him all of this stuff, giving him everything that I had. I didn't have a ton of information, but I gave him what I had, and I never heard back for a long time. But I ended up finishing my mission. I ended up coming home and actually dating my MTC teacher because he broke it up with the other girlfriend. I ended up dating him. And so while we're dating, I get an email from the mission president saying, hey, look, I think we found your grandma, but she's denying a lot of things, and we think that a photo of you would really help. Let her see you, let her feel like who you are. So I sent them a photo, and then a week later I got an email back with the missionaries and my grandma, like a picture, and they had found her. And I just, the feeling was insane. I was like, wow, this is what I have prayed for my entire life. And if only I knew that all those things in my life had led me to here, I wouldn't have believed it. And so they found my grandma, which then they got contact with my mother, and then my mother finally reached out to me a few weeks later, and I ended up meeting my birth mom. So 21 years later, I ended up being able to Skype with my birth mother, and I ended up seeing who she was and talking to her, and it was surreal. It was so crazy because I never really thought that that would happen. It was always a dream that I had, but it never felt like I could reach that dream. But it was there, it was in front of me, and it was beautiful. So after that, I ended up marrying my MTC teacher, who so coincidentally only taught one missionary from his mission, which was the Baltics, which was me. Out of all the missionaries he taught, they all went to Russia or Ukraine, and I was the only student he taught that went to the Baltics. And his story of getting put as the MTC teacher is so crazy because they denied him first, and they're like, no, you're not good enough to be a teacher or whatever. And then they called back and they just said, for some reason we feel like you need to teach. And now we look back and we understand why he needed to teach, because we ended up getting married. So we ended up getting married. It was great, and we ended up having 2 kids. And when I had my kids, this is kind of when I realized that there were a lot of things that were not right about my childhood. Motherhood to me took a toll on me. It was very hard. I didn't expect motherhood to be what it was, and I feel like I lost a lot of the joy that came from being a motherhood because I was not prepared for what motherhood was, and I just was triggered so much. I started to remember a lot of my childhood when I had kids because it just got brought up, and the older my kids got, the more I remembered, hey, look, this wasn't fair, this wasn't fair, this wasn't fair. And I ended up starting to go to therapy and really figuring it out. There was a long time that had passed though after being a mother, and my kids were getting older, and I really wanted to get to know my birth mother in person. Like, I wanted to see who she was. I wanted to see her characteristics and her personality. And so we booked kind of a last minute trip to Thailand because I'm not able to go to Russia. And she came to fly to Thailand, and we got to spend the entire week together. And meeting her for the first time in person was so surreal. It was beautiful, honestly. I remember just being so nervous and anxious because of the language and everything. But there was a moment when we had first met, and we just gave each other the longest hug. And I remember, I can still feel it, that hug gave me more love than I had ever received in my entire childhood. It just felt like I belonged, and that I was home, and that this was what everything was for this moment. And it was beautiful. And we got to spend the week in Thailand with her. She loved my kids. She would hold my kids' hands everywhere we went. She was the best grandma to them. It was a beautiful time, and it wasn't all perfect. There were moments that were tough, but all in all, it was just everything I could have asked for. Meeting my birth mother in person was so healing for me because I felt so much love, and it was love that I deserved as a child, and it was love that I deserved my entire childhood. And that moment was so special. In the midst of like trying to figure out motherhood, I ended up starting a business. I was a photographer first, and then I started like a dress business, and I ended up closing that dress business actually just last year. So because I had the experience of marketing and like, you know, being on that business side with social media and stuff, I kind of had the feeling just last July to start an Instagram page, which is probably how some of you know who I am. So I ended up starting an Instagram page and just sharing modest fashion and kind of sharing my story a little bit and, you know, my testimony about things. And because I had taken all these steps to get to where I am today, last year I had been told so many times to start writing a book. So I started writing a book and I started reliving through like my childhood, my teen years, you know, all of this. And I ended up getting to where I was now and thinking, you know, it would be so cool to meet my birth dad. But I never thought that I could because my grandma wrote in the information for my birth dad. So there was no information besides a name, and that was it. So I remember going back through all my messages with my birth mother when we first met, and there, sure enough, was all this information about my birth dad that I had completely forgot because I was so in the moment when I met her. It had a birth date, it had a birthplace, it had all of these things that I needed to be able to find him. So I get on Facebook, I'm part of this Facebook Russian adoptees group, and I reach out to the detective there who has been helping Russian adoptees find their birth parents. And I reached out, I gave her the information that she needed, and within 12 hours, I was able to find information on him and find him. And so I ended up finding out later that he died in 2011, so I never will get to meet him. But I ended up finding out that he did have the 2 sons and he did have his wife. So I went on the Russian app, like the OK app, and stalking all of their profiles. I just was so amazed to see all of these people who were my family. This was something that I never thought I would get to see. On the OK, there were so many fun pages from years ago when my birth dad was a little boy and from when his dad was a teacher, and all of these beautiful images that were just so crazy to see. The Korean culture and heritage that I didn't get to know that I had was so amazing. Anyway, in the midst of all my stalking, I found that one of my half-brothers wrote his number down to someone in the comments, and I took that number and I put it in WhatsApp and just was like, I'm just gonna go for it. I'm just gonna message and just try to see, like, maybe this number doesn't even work anymore. But I messaged them and I said like, hey, this is me, I'm your sister. And I sent a birth certificate and everything so they knew I wasn't scamming. And within 15 minutes, I got a message back being like, yeah, I'm your brother. Like, I actually had no idea who you were. I had to talk to my mom and like, she told me the whole story. And I ended up finding my half brother and knowing that I had 2 new brothers, but my other brother passed away unfortunately a few years ago. But this opened the door to so much that I just didn't know was waiting there for me. And so last minute, a few weeks after I initially met my half brother online, we both booked a trip to Korea because he lives in Russia, I live in Utah. We booked a trip and we met in Korea just this year in January. I literally arrived in Korea January 1st, and I got to start the new year off meeting my long lost family from Russia and Korea, and it was so amazing. So I got to spend New Year's coming and meeting my birth family for the first time, and it was amazing. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that I'd get to go full circle and meet everyone who was a part of my past. Aunts, uncles, cousins, my brother, just so many people that I just had no idea that I didn't know. So many people that I have just learned to love. And my father wasn't perfect, and that's a conversation, you know, that I'll have with him when the time comes. But his family was nothing but amazing and beautiful and so kind to me, and it was amazing to spend this new year with them and get to know where I came from, the heritage, to see the personalities, the characteristics that make me who I am, but I had no idea. So that's my life story. It's crazy, but I'm gonna just finish off by saying this. that in the moments of hard things, it's hard to see the end. It is extremely hard to see that all of these bad things that happen to us can be made good. And that all of these little situations and all of these little choices that we make day to day can impact our life in miraculous and huge ways. Those little steps create those big moments that are just amazing and beautiful and so miraculous. I believe that God gave me my life to share with others because I know that my life was given to help others. I know that I experienced an extreme amount of abuse and torture so that in the end I could share it and I could help others. And I could help others see that if you keep going, there is good, and it doesn't have to end with bad. That these bad things can be made good. I hope you guys enjoyed my life story. It's crazy. Let me know if you guys want like other videos talking about my mission or about the abuse or about certain things specifically. I can do that for you guys. But I hope you guys have a good day and thank you for watching.